We're talking in this series about the most fundamental of all questions in Bible study, and that is, what is the gospel? My strong impression, after spending some 30 years in a Bible college teaching the New Testament and the biblical languages, is that people don't really have a handle, as we say in America, on what the gospel is. If you'll ask the average churchgoer, he will talk about the death and resurrection of Jesus, and that won't be wrong, except it will only be half the gospel. And a half-truth, I have to tell you, is often a lie. There are elements of the gospel which are being omitted from preaching, namely the gospel of the kingdom of God. Jesus begins his ministry by announcing the saving gospel of the kingdom. He states that his purpose in preaching, at all times, in Luke 4:43, is to preach the gospel about the Vasilia tou Theou, the kingdom of God. I'm using the modern Greek pronunciation. In just a moment I'll give you a Greek word, and we can start on how to learn elementary things about pronouncing Greek in a modern way and reading the New Testament with a modern Greek accent. That evangelion is the good news. It's the saving gospel. Hebrews 2:3 says that Jesus was the first preacher of the gospel. On no account is that gospel to be altered in any way, because Paul at the end of Acts, in Acts 28, verses 23 and 31, is still preaching the same gospel to Jews and Gentiles. So it must be said that the gospel of the kingdom was indeed preached first to Jews, but not only to Jews. There's a dramatic and catastrophic theory out there called ultra-dispensationalism, which actually takes away the very Christian gospel and says that it was only for Jews and not for us. That has to be eliminated from your thinking before you can make progress in understanding the New Testament. So then, talking of the gospel of the kingdom, Peter, the apostle, is very clear in 1 Peter 1, verses 22 and following, that it's the spora, that's the Greek word, the seed message of the kingdom, that has to cause the begetting again, the being born again. And Peter there says that we're begotten again, engendered again. We start all over. This is the born again phenomenon of John 3:5 in Peter's language. We start all over when that spora, that sowing, that seeding of the word impacts us. Rather like the human reproductive system, imagine the head, human head as an ovum. Imagine that sperma, that spora, sporos, coming in and affecting the mind. Without that, there is no rebirth. It's the immortality seed, the seed of immortality, the incorruptible seed that must enter. Now, if you were the devil, what would you do? You'd want that seed removed. Luke 8:12 says exactly that. It's when people hear the gospel of the kingdom, the devil is intent on removing that gospel of the kingdom. Oh, he can go on talking about Jesus till you're blue in the face. You can even talk about the death and resurrection of Jesus without mentioning the underlying substratum of his gospel of the kingdom message. You really aren't getting anywhere. So let me deal with that word spora then, 1 Peter chapter 1, 22 and onwards. He speaks of incorruptible seed. That is God's seed, as 1 John calls it. It's the very, if you like, the very DNA of God that's implanted in us. So we are not just adopted children, we are genetically children of God, if in fact we've received that seed of God, that spora.